My name is Lisa Carlson. I'm Chief Exec of Canterbury's Business Improvement District, and we run regular training events, regular networking events, amongst many other things. And just a few I wanted to highlight to you. So our training program usually runs from about January to June, unless something else comes up that we really want to share with you. And so we've been doing a number of sessions on everything from marketing to photography, which is coming up, business rates, all sorts of digital marketing sessions, and sustainability. We've got a couple of sessions on that, including the one today. I just wanted to mention, if you missed the session on business rates, I highly recommend it. We've got it up on YouTube, don't we? Right, yeah, it's easily digestible. So if you're wondering what kind of small business rates relief is being offered from April, transitional rates relief, there is some good news in there, and there are a number of changes, including, of course, the introduction of the new ratings list. So I recommend that one. We'll put the link in the chat. And we'll put the link to our training sessions in the chat as well, in case there's anything else you want to sign up to. One I will highlight coming up on the 29th of March, we have commissioned an organisation called the Place Support Partnership to support businesses in cost saving specifically over the next year. So they're going to be with us for the whole year. We're going to kick it all off on the 29th of March in the Marlow studio. The Marlow's going to share some of the work they've done in reducing costs and moving towards being carbon neutral and beyond. And so this program isn't just about sustainability cost savings, but all sorts of cost savings, utilities, you name it. And they have a really, really good track record in other towns and cities. So we're really pleased about that coming up. Our next networking session is going to be really exciting. We're getting back out and about again, hoping for much warmer, or at least marginally warmer weather. On the 22nd of March, we're going to be exploring the Cathedral Quarter. So we're going to do a short tour around Burgate and visit 4 different businesses. And Danielle, who's delivering the session today, will be with us on the 22nd, and will be with us at a number of our networking events. If you have any ongoing questions about how to run sustainable events of any kind, Danielle will be with us going forward. We're going to introduce each other in just a moment, but Danielle, we met in 2018 or 2019, which seems like light years ago. And we then connected as the Canterbury Climate Action Partnership was being formed, and you helped us with the festival and awards event recently, which was absolutely fantastic. And Danielle's working with us on a number of our events this year to work on the kind of carbon reporting on that and all sorts of other aspects. But what Danielle's going to do today is talk to us about events of all shapes and sizes. So this isn't just the big public events, although it's that as well, but any kind of corporate events or meetings, and how we can work on saving money and saving the planet. So Danielle's the founder of Reward Sustainable Events. She's going to tell us more about herself in just a moment. But let's go around the screen. So I think most of you know Rachel anyway, but we'll start with Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel. I'm Head of Marketing and Communications for Canterbury Bid.
And Blake.
Hi all, I'm Blake. I run Republic Events. We do a kind of a whole variety of different events, from pub nights to street food markets. Yeah, and I sit on the bid board as well.
Thanks, Blake. Ed.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ed, and I work with Blake, and I am working on a new event, which is coming up this summer in Canterbury, which I'm like about this close to sending everyone a PDF about. So just don't worry, it's happening.
Teaser.
Ed does a number of other things in the community, including the launch of a new podcast recently, which is excellent. Been able to listen to a few episodes of that, and Ed used to also be on the bid board.
Yeah, and I also should say Canterbury Residents Group, Canterbury Community Company, always happy to promote events. So whenever I'm with any other fellow event organisers, I would remind them to get onto Canterbury Residents Group and promote it there. It's a great result.
Thanks, Ed. And Paul.
Hello, Paul here. Standing Tree Clinic just opened in Northgate. I'm the classical acupuncturist, I've put some sustainable things within my clinic. This is like paper, energy's up 100%. And I'm trying to bring that in. I also teach Tai Chi and Qigong, which is something that I've taught within adult ed before and a little bit within the university as well. So as things with the business go ahead, I'll be looking to do some workshops. I have already put on the chat that I'm due to have a client in shortly. So, and as a new business, if they're there, I grab them.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, a
so
very
I might
warm
dip
welcome.
out, but I thought I'd say
Absolutely.
hello at least.
We're so pleased you could join us even for a little bit, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Julia.
Morning, everyone. I'm Julia, and I work for Canterbury BID as an operations manager.
And is in the midst of organising Canterbury's inaugural Best Bar None Awards for our licensed venues, which is next week. So excited about that, and Danielle's supporting us with that as well.
Yeah, together with Danielle, yes.
Lucy.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm operations manager at the BID as well.
And Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I am the marketing and BD coordinator for Operations. My role is gradually becoming more and more events-based, so I'm interested to learn some valuable things.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. And Anna.
Hi, yeah, I'm Anna. I'm a marketing communications officer at the University of Kent, and I work mainly with the conference and events team.
Great. Very warm welcome. And I will now hand over to Danielle.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. So thank you all so much for sharing, where you're at. We're going to dive into a little bit more of a detail of that as we progress. But thank you so much for joining us. As the title would suggest, we get, I think, a lot of pushback with regards to sustainability, that it's going to be, it's going to cost you more money. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to. It can save you money, it can make you money, and all whilst you're protecting the planet as well. So that's the plan. Let me make sure this is working. So a little bit about who I am, a bit of a quick introduction. So my name is Danielle Ward. I'm the founder, as Lisa kindly shared in my introduction, the founder of Reward Events. Really, where did this all come from? I've worked in corporate events for sort of over a decade, and was just, we were doing events for events' sake and throwing thousands and thousands of pounds at it. And as you all would know, the event industry is very temporary. As soon as you're setting it all up, you're ripping it all back down again. And everything's pretty much single use, from your banners to your giveaways to your single-use carpet if you were doing an exhibition. So, I love events, but I was getting really frustrated with the whole industry and how temporary it was. I thought there's got to be a better way of doing it. So I launched my sustainable event business at the beginning of 2020. So just to give you a bit of a flavour as to the kind of things that I've got involved with, it tends to be sort of partnerships. So I will partner with various different businesses and event agencies. So they know how to do events. I'm not telling them how to do that, but they need a little bit of hand holding with regards to how can we make them more sustainable and how can we bring that side in. A couple of zero waste dinners that I ran last year. So I don't know if you've heard of the Rise Up Residency. It was an art project down in Margate, using the power of art and murals around Margate to sort of really raise the issue of climate change and particularly plastic pollution, which was a fantastic thing to be part of. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. But it's a real mix of sort of live events as well as consultancy. I'm hoping to be launching my own carbon literacy workshops this year so that people can learn more about, it's similar to what we're doing today, the sort of the science bit as well as sort of practical applications. And also recently I'm working with a company called Green Gauge and sort of helping venues become more sustainable through their EcoSmart accreditation program. So I think inherently, I think people are trying to do the right thing, but terrified of greenwashing, not sure where to go next. Know they're doing some good stuff, but not sure, what the next step is. And so that accreditation program is something that ties in really nicely, with how I operate, particularly as a venue, is normally my first port of call when I'm running events. In addition to that, I'm also on the Canterbury Climate Action Partnership Board. I'm also a representative for Plastic Free Minster. So I live down in Minster near Ramsgate. excuse me. And yeah, lots going on, but all with the collective and shared sort of understanding that, you know, sustainability is the future, and it absolutely, you know, ties all these different elements together. And so anything to do with sustainability through events, through bringing people together in a way that, you know, doesn't have to cost the earth. We can save money, we can make more money, and we can obviously, you know, have that positive impact on the planet as well. So this was very much, you know, in terms of, you know, what is reward all about? You know, it's really about, you know, reflecting on that event management process and rethinking the impact our events have and reimagining what our events could look like. You know, the reduce, reuse, recycle mantra is still very valid, but as you can see here, there's definitely more than 3 R's. So it's all definitely about thinking about how we can challenge things and how we can do things slightly differently. So today, in terms of the time that we've got, is going to be quite high level, but I'm hoping to rattle through. I just want to give you sort of a high level overview of all the different elements. We're going to cover a brief introduction to sustainability, and we'll cover in a second, you know, where everybody's at on that journey. So sorry if it's too basic for some people and maybe too advanced for others, but I think it's important to have that sort of baseline understanding. A little bit of science in there, but again, I think that's important, but I'll keep it brief. And then we're going to dive into a best practice guide to sustainable events. So how can we use events and, you know, to be driving that positive impact whilst reducing the negative impact that events have, and then also some overarching themes that come out of that and how you can build that into your planning. And then I'd like to leave with some takeaways, because I think, you know, you come along to workshops. I know I go along to a lot of events, and then you listen for an hour and then you sort of think, well, now what? And you sort of go back to your day job. So I'm hoping to leave you with 3 things you can do this week, 3 things you can do this month, and 3 things you can do and plan into the rest of the year. I'll pause at various points, because I'll probably pass out if I don't have a drink, and also just to give you a chance to sort of digest. And if there's any questions, we can pause at various points as well. Okay, so introduction to sustainability. So what does it mean? Why should you care? You know, what's in it for you? So what we're going to do is to start with a quick poll. If you want to get your phones out, or equally you can do this on your PCs that you're on. You can either go to slido.com, or if I just open this up, you can scan that QR code. Can everybody see that okay on the screen? I'm just not sure. Who's got that? Yeah, people are getting their phones out.
Yep, that's good. We can see it, Danielle, thanks.
So if you scan the QR code, it will take you straight to the poll. If not, slido.com, and just put the code in, #bid1. And I'd love to understand, where are you on your sustainability journey? And, you know, there's no judgment here at all. This is all anonymous. But are we early stages, just starting out, sort of information gathering, middle of the road, but, you know, think you can do more, or pretty established, you think you're one of the leaders in this space? I'll just give you a second just to bring that through. Okay, 7, 8, all 50-50 split. Nice. Anyone going to throw it? Okay, cool. Well, I mean, that's pretty much what I was expecting, which is fantastic. So so thank you very much for that. Super. Just give me an idea where we're at. And then while we've still got our phones out, I'd love to do a second poll. This is around, what does sustainability mean to you? So if I just launch the next one. And again, no judgment, no right or wrong answer. This is a word cloud. So if you can try and keep it to a single word or a sort of hyphenated phrase, it works better. But what does sustainability mean to you? If someone's talking about that, what sort of springs to mind? And again, no right or wrong answers. Just give you a second to have a think about that one. Future. Wow, oh, here we go. Climate change, no single-use items, reuse, lower costs in long term. Thank you, ever put that one in. Kind to the planet, reducing waste. Fab. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Has everybody, oh, yep, here we've got a few more. Protect. Zero carbon. Excellent. I think that's everyone. I don't want to cut it off before we've finished. Super. Okay, really good mix. And as I said, no right or wrong answer, but that's brilliant. Thank you very much. So the official definition from the Brundtland report back in the 80s, is sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. And if we then apply that in an event-specific format, sustainable event management is the process of integrating environmental and social responsibility issues into event planning. So I think we often do get caught up on the environmental piece, but there is a wider piece going on. And I don't know whether you're familiar with the phrase triple bottom line or people, planet, profit, but this ultimately highlights the three different sections that combine. You know, that star in the middle, that is what we're aiming for, that sustainability star, where your social progress, your environmental protection and your economic growth are all in sort of, you know, perfect harmony. I think it's really important, you know, when we think back to the COVID days, you know, everybody was, you know, like, I have to park sustainability, I have to park the environment stuff, we have to get the business up and running again. When in actual fact, those businesses that incorporated their people, planet and profit elements are the ones that are still around today and thriving, because they've you know, brought all of those elements together. So it's really important that we aren't forgetting the environment stuff and focusing on, you know, building the profits and making sure that we're looking at each of these three things in harmony. So you also might be wondering, you know, so what, you know, I've got so much going on, why do I need to care about sustainability? And this is quite a text heavy one. I promise this is the only one. But I just wanted to sort of highlight that, you know, we're talking today around how sustainability, and particularly in events, can save you money. For me, I definitely think it's a cost efficiency piece, and you're getting rid of things you don't need, and we're going to come into that. But it's also about making money and giving you access to those new revenue streams, as well as, you know, protecting the planet. So obviously, if you're saving money, your profit margins are already bigger, but there's also a number of additional economic benefits. So access to green funding and tax benefits, mitigating the risk of, you know, future regulatory and financial penalties that are inevitably going to be coming down the line. Attracting and keeping investors. 85% of investors really look at, you know, ESG and sustainability ratings in their decision making. So it's really important for that. Increase business and stakeholder value for long-term prosperity, and also leverages new opportunities, new innovations. It's a key selling point. And also, and probably the most important point, is your customers are asking for it. You know, they are wanting to buy from, work for, work with sustainable brands. You know, if you look at the B Corp movement, how, you know, people aspire to be working for those brands and working with those companies. And actually, according to to a recent Nielsen survey, 66% of global consumers and as many as 77% of global millennials are even happy to pay extra for sustainability. So, you know, this is no longer a nice to have, and you'll do it if you have time. It's really paramount to your sort of strategy moving forward. You know, people want to buy from, they want to work for, and work with businesses that are purpose driven and actually stand for something. And that in itself attracts that top talent. It motivates your employees. It sort of boosts that productivity. So just a couple of things just to bear in mind. And I am sharing obviously these slides and the recording afterwards for you to take a look at. But I think it's pretty clear from this that it's no longer, you know, just about it's the right thing to do, but it's the sensible business thing to do. So where do we start? Well, reward is very much built on the Sustainable Development Goals. So the UN proposed these back in 2015. There's 17. We try and build our events on the Sustainable Development Goals. You're not expected to tick off all of these. Again, so you've got to make sustainability sustainable. But it's about looking at, okay, how can we build some of these into our event planning? How can we build it into the agenda? And you can see it reflects that people, planet, profit element in terms of you've got well-being on there, you've got responsible consumption and production, you've also got climate action. And although they're all equally important and we should be hitting these by 2030, we've not got long, climate action is the one obviously that's most pressing at the moment with the current climate crisis that we're in. So, you know, without that, these others are going to be very unachievable. So here comes the science bit, like Jennifer Aniston, I wish. So promise this is super high level, but really important. So climate science in 12 words. I love this. Kim Nicholas, she's a sustainability professor at the University of Sweden. And this is how she's summed up sustainable or climate science. So 1, it's warming. 2, it's us. 3, we're sure. 4, it's bad. But 5, we can fix it. So let's just sort of go through that in a bit more detail. You might be familiar with these, the warming stripes. Ed Hawkins from Reading University, also, I don't know if you're a football fan, but Reading Football Club have this actually on their football shirts, but to highlight how the planet has warmed since the Industrial Revolution. And as we will all remember, the summer last year was the hottest on record, and likely to be the coolest that we're ever likely to experience, which is truly terrifying. So yes, we are definitely warming up. And unfortunately, yes, it definitely is us. And you can't have a sustainability workshop without a quote from this man. But right now, he says, we're facing a man-made disaster, man-made, there's no doubt about it, of global scale, our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change. Then in terms of, what's it all about? Why is it warming? Where has it come from? You will see ultimately it's the increase of the CO2. We're talking about greenhouse gases, but for the purpose of this, it's more than carbon emissions, but we'll keep it simple. As you can see, as the carbon emissions increase, as does the global temperature. And I don't know if you're familiar with this book, How Bad Are Bananas, but it is essentially the carbon footprint of everything. So from a banana at 110 grams of CO2 through to a return flight, that's a return flight Hong Kong to London, it's 4.5 tons of CO2. So that's, verging on half your global climate footprint, carbon footprint for the year. So it just sort of gives you an indication of, where that carbon footprint lies. But it is those carbon emissions, and everything we do, whatever we're buying, what we're eating, what we're wearing, how we're traveling, everything has a carbon emission associated with it. And that has obviously an impact and a heating element to it as well. To help you visualize what a ton of carbon looks like, because that is mind-blowing. It's, if you want to think about it, this size of this balloon, or equally it's 5 double-decker London buses. That is 1 ton of CO2. And roughly, they give a sort of a rough guidance of your personal carbon footprint for the year is about 10 tons, just to give you a sort of a rough indication. So what are the impacts of this? We've already started to see that extreme weather, the rising sea levels, the melting ice caps, damage to infrastructure, localized flooding. The impacts are unfathomable. So, and this is only going to get worse as the heating continues. So what can we do about it? Well, you might have heard about the 1.5 degree pathway. We basically need to stop the Earth heating. We're currently at 1.2 degrees, and we need to stay below 2 degrees before we reach what is known as a tipping point. So past that, doom, and we cannot recover from that. So as part of the Paris Agreement, we need to stay underneath the 1.5 degree centigrade limit, and that will keep us on track so that we're avoiding these tipping points that have been shared. So it's really important that we're cutting back on things and that we're keeping those carbon emissions down. And ultimately, just to explain, that greenhouse effect, in a similar way as a greenhouse would work, the carbon, the light is coming in and it's not allowed to reflect back out. It's being trapped by these carbon emissions, and that is what's causing the Earth to heat up. So it's that we need to bring those carbon emissions down. So what is the aim and what do we need to do? So we need to halve our CO2 emissions by 2030 to be in with a chance of keeping temperature changes below 1.5 degrees. So let me say that again. We need to halve our CO2 emissions by 2030 to be in with a chance of keeping temperature changes below 1.5 degrees. And then obviously the longer term goal is to be carbon net zero by 2050. So you would have seen this term net zero bandied around, governments, businesses, left, right and centre talking about how they're going to reach net zero and by what year. But what does it mean? What the hell is net zero? So if you think about, we need to be lowering our emissions. So for example, you're investing in green technologies, solar instead of fossil fuels, combined with you're measuring and you're removing those emissions. So you could be looking at direct air capture, and that technology is not here yet, but it will be coming. But essentially what goes up into the atmosphere needs to come back down again. If you think about carbon neutral, that's very much, yes, I've got a carbon footprint and I'm going to plant some trees and I'm going to offset that. Net zero is a much more robust long-term strategy for actually removing that carbon from the atmosphere rather than just sort of offsetting it and balancing it somewhere else. So very simple definition of that, but essentially thinking about what's going up must come down, to try and keep that. And it's the only way we're going to hit that target of reducing our emissions and getting to net zero by 2050. Cool. So just to sort of sort of summarize, it's warming, it's us, we're sure it's bad, but we can absolutely fix it. And if we come back to David, he quoted, and this was at COP26 back in Glasgow, if working apart we're a force powerful enough to destabilize our planet, surely working together we are powerful enough to save it. And that's where we come now into our sustainable events guide, because this is our opportunity to make a difference and be inputting some of these changes. So there's a lot there. I don't know if we want to just pause and see if anyone has any immediate questions, or whether it's for a bigger discussion later on. Let me know if there's any questions.
Nothing in the chat yet,
Okay.
Danielle. Yeah.
No worries. So let's carry on. So next poll, while we sort of get into our sustainability sort of event practice, I would love to know from you, poll up, what you think the sort of the biggest offenders are when you're thinking about running your event. What do you think creates the most carbon emissions? Again, this is a word cloud, so feel free to put in a word or a phrase. But when you're planning your event, what do you think are the biggest offenders when it comes to carbon emissions? Transport, power generation, non-recyclable waste, nice. Fuel generators, yeah, definitely on a festival format for sure. Transport to and from, rubbish disposal, brilliant, great, these are great coming through. Food waste, disposable waste, brilliant, great. I'm so used to people not filling in the poll, so this is brilliant. Thank you so much for, for being involved. Delivery, transport, single-use waste, yeah, amazing. Any more? Have we got everything? New response. Bits of paper torn out of my notebook. It's okay. It's recyclable unless your notebook's made of gold. Fab. Thank you so much. So, in short, you're all right. There is, you know, a real. We're going to come on to sort of measurement later on, but you know, measuring your carbon footprint is probably the biggest thing that you can do in order to be able to focus your attentions and understand where you can make the biggest impact. So this was from a sample event that I did. I actually ran with John Lewis last year. It was the launch of their sustainability and ethics conference, and we carbon reported their whole event for them. So you can expect things to be slightly less because obviously we were running it sustainably. You know, and your rough idea for an average event would be sort of 10 to 12 tons. So we came in sort of a good halfway of that. But yeah, the key sort of offending areas, and I think we covered them all, is energy, which you can see here in this sort of orange area. This was so low because they were on 100% green energy. We'll come to that. Catering, that is always a huge offender. There was a hell of a lot of emissions associated with food. Travel, that came up a few times in the poll, so well done for anyone who said that. You know, a good half of the emissions is associated with how people are traveling to and from your event. Production, this was very low for this event because they literally had some hanging banners and used digital signage. But you know, that would usually be your set, your stage, your branding, your banners, even down to your badges and brochures, marketing materials, that sort of thing. And then this salmony pink color is relating to the waste, which again, very low for this event because very low amount of materials was actually created and needed to be disposed of. So let's get into it. Ultimately, you could say the most sustainable event is no event, but we know, having had 2, maybe 3 years of no events, that that's not the answer. That as social beings, you know, we're always going to need that face-to-face interaction. We need to come together to share ideas, educate people, collaborate, celebrate. You know, there's so many excuses and reasons to have an event. So they're not going anywhere, but what we do know is that how we are running them and how we manage them needs to change. So we need to be looking at how we can reduce those negative impacts, and we're going to take you through some ideas now, and also look at how we can use events as a platform to really drive that positive impact. You know, how can we use events as a showcase for all the good things that we're doing, and to give back to communities. And we'll go into more details of that. I'm also going to be sharing some sort of overarching sort of strategic things as well you want to think about. So coming back to this carbon footprint, we're first of all looking at travel. So that came up as one of the key things. What we need to be thinking here is this is everybody that's coming to your event and leaving the event, and not only your attendees, but it's also thinking about your suppliers, your crew, any staff that you've got coming, and that message needs to be continued throughout all of them. So the main thing here is obviously we want to be encouraging people to use public transport. That's the most fantastic thing about Canterbury, is you're very, very well connected with the bus station, the train station. And also we want to be encouraging active travel. So that's walking, that's cycling. This is an example here from BMA House, a great sustainable venue in London. And they actually put on all of their communications and on their website, you know, a clean air walking route to get from King's Cross Station to their venue. So thinking about, you know, how we can almost gamify how people access your events, promoting and incentivizing those public transport or active travel routes. And also, you know, we want to be communicating that as much as possible. So in all of your communications, for example, the event that we're doing next week for the Best Bar None Awards, we've included on the registration page, you know, can you tell us how you are traveling and where from, so that we can start to calculate that carbon footprint. Trying to get that information afterwards is a huge headache. So if you can build that into your processes that you're already doing at the point of registration, makes things really, really simple. I'm also thinking from a supply chain perspective, you know, don't be shipping in sets and stage and AV and lighting equipment if your venue's already got it. You know, you don't need a load of plasma screens or furniture if you've got existing stuff already in your venue. So think about what you can already use that's saving you trucking in a load of stuff. And similarly, you know, obviously carbon footprints go through the roof when you start adding in air travel, but where you can use suppliers that have got electric vehicles and obviously venues that have EV chargers, but we're always trying to lead with that, you know, using the public transport and using active travel where possible. And Mike Berners-Lee, the guy who wrote the How Bad Are Bananas book, he said a typical carbon saving of 75% if you're using a train, bus or bike. So it's a huge, huge saving. So next we're looking at production. So as I said, this is all sort of set stage branding. This was my stand that I actually had at the Canterbury Climate Action event that we ran last autumn. This is made from, so my husband works in solar. This is made from pallets, that the solar panels come in on. They are real plants that are now in my garden. And this banner was actually made from recycled ocean plastic. So again, I think the key message for me that I try and get across is that sustainability isn't about compromise. You can still look really slick, you can still look really good, just without the sort of, you know, the bad bits. So it's not about we have to scrap everything and make everything out of, you know, knitted yogurt and potato sacks. You can still definitely have a high-end event, but it's just making those better decisions. So thinking about sort of the wider experience, you know, obviously leading with digital first if you can, so that rather than having loads of pull-up banners, that you're actually using screens that the venue have got as a first port of call. You know, you want branding, you want people to know they're at the right place, you want branding for your event, but there's ways that, you know, once you've established, yes, we're doing that, how can we then think about, you know, the best way of doing that, the most sustainable way of doing that? Even thinking about badges, you know, I remember a time when we used to have everything was a single-use plastic card that would just literally just get binned at the end of the event. So now thinking about, you know, you can print on seeded paper that people can take home with them and plant, you know, so they've got wildflowers growing from having attended your event. Marketing materials, you can access now via a QR code. So instead of having a load of brochures that, you know, as soon as they're printed, they're pretty much out of date, being able to access them via a QR code and download them to their phone. And giveaways, I'm very torn on giveaways. I used to think just scrap them, but I definitely think there is a place for them. I used to actually replace them with a charitable donation, but actually now looking at how you can work with local businesses, local community, local artisans even that could come to your event and make that part of an interactive experience for your guests, and then something they can take home. That is a real, you know, a win for sustainability on all scales, in the sense of, you know, you're giving back to that local community, but also giving your experience to your delegates as well. So again, it's just thinking about ways of doing things slightly differently. So the next one is around catering. And as we said, this is a sort of a big chunky one, you know, and who doesn't love food at an event? But unfortunately, it tends to come with a huge carbon footprint, particularly around the waste. And we're speaking about waste separately. Plant-based food has a much lower carbon footprint. You can see here in this graphic, the difference in the carbon emissions associated. If you do want to have meat, opt for poultry versus red meat. It has a much lower carbon emission factor. And then also when you're thinking about actually how you're serving the food, you know, buffets are a real no-no in terms of the amount of waste that you're creating. And as you can see there, 30% of event food is wasted. 75% of that, there's nothing wrong with it. It's consumable, but it ends up just getting binned. So this is where we want to start thinking about using food sharing apps, and we'll come to that in a second. But also thinking about serving food. You know, a lot of people think, oh, I will have those nice compostable or biodegradable plates. You know, they sort of look eco, that will be good. A lot of the time, if you don't have those correct waste streams in place, they're going to end up in landfill along with plastic bottles. So the best thing is always reusable. So just use the plates and the glasses and the cutlery that you've already got. You don't need to be going out spending a load of money on something that, you know, is going to be thrown away. We're seeing a lot more people being asked to bring their water bottles to events and refilling refill points. People forget their bottles, you know, have plastic, not plastic glasses, have real glasses that people can use. So again, it's just thinking about getting rid of, really is no excuse really for anything single use, really trying to clamp down on that and get rid of that. So then looking at waste that we touched on, obviously it's a huge area that we can have a positive impact in, and if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter behind the USA and China. So this is a huge problem, but again, you know, you can in the way that you're designing your event, look at how you can reduce this. So food to order, and as I say, buffet is terrible for its waste, but also looking at how you can use, you know, Olio or Too Good to Go, you know, these food sharing apps. The event I had mentioned before that I did in Margate, the Rise Up residency, we had sort of 35 crew that were there all week, 3 meals a day, and after each sort of serving, breakfast, lunch and dinner, the crew would just sort of let me know, okay, we've got 5 meals left, we've got 3 meals left, there's nothing left. And I contacted the local social supermarket in Margate. They would come and collect the meals and then redistribute it. So I know that there are concerns around health and safety for food. Obviously, everything has to be labelled, everything has to be refrigerated. But, you know, a lot of the time, Olio and Too Good to Go and places like that do take that accountability on. So, but there is a way of building that into your planning so that nothing goes to waste. Equally, this picture here, these are eco bricks. So things that you think, God, I really can't recycle those. Crisp packets, food, wrapping, they can be stuffed into these eco bricks and be used for construction. So there's no real reason. There's very little actually that is actually waste is waste. We really need to be rethinking what we consider waste to be. And if you're thinking about it from a venue perspective, you know, I think inherently people want to do the right thing. So thinking about making it as easy as possible for them. So have really clear receptacles that are really clearly labelled as to what is going to go in each one. And rather than a general waste bin, label that landfill or last resort. So we can try and start nudging that behaviour so that people are trying to do the right thing. And then lastly, this is around energy. And I think someone mentioned on the call that they're on renewable energy. But this is ultimately about your use of energy, use of your event space. So firstly, you want to be using a venue. If you can be outside, amazing. But if you're using a venue, use it in an appropriate size. You don't want to be heating, lighting, cooling an event space that's too big for what you're using. Keeping doors closed, something as simple as that would keep those emissions down. There's been a bit of, you know, a grey area in terms of should we be switching energy providers at the moment because of the energy crisis, and it's a bit of a troubled one. But obviously, as soon as you can, if you're not already on a renewable energy tariff, please do that. And obviously, looking long term at sort of investing in solar. That's not an option for everybody. Certainly, you know, old listed buildings, that's not an option. But looking at how you can be clever with your energy use, and particularly around that measurement piece is really important. Cool, I'll pause there just while that's about sort of keeping that negative piece down. Obviously, naturally, a lot of these are around sort of efficiencies. So by not doing something, or by doing less of something, or by reusing something so that you're not, you know, one and done, that is a huge cost saving. And and obviously, as I say, increasing those profit margins and protecting the planet at the same time. But any questions on how we're reducing those emissions? How are we doing for time?
Danielle, can I ask a question?
Yes, please do.
I was just thinking about events like Blake has run in the past, and we have quite a few events that come through the Dame John Garden, and in there they don't have any power supplies at the moment for electricity. So I think a lot of it has to run through generators. I think that's right, Blake. But
yeah,
what's the difference in terms of impact between a generator and if you have an electricity point?
It depends again what's going into it. So if you're using like a biofuel, that would be like your greener version of a generator. If it's your traditional sort of oil fossil fuel led one, that's a sort of the worst case scenario. But yeah, I mean, in that situation, and this is where sustainability needs to be about sort of weighing up those pros and cons and looking at, well, what do we need? You need to have power. You can't not have power if you're doing an event outside. But again, you can have solar generated power generators as well, so that you're actually, they're being charged up and essentially you're running off a big battery. So there's ways of doing it that I think sometimes it's a case of, well, I know that I'll just go to that. I've got a supplier, I'll just do that. So it's trying to think about, we know we need to have it. Is there an alternative route we can go down? And this, in a case of, we're trying to save money, that may be a bigger outlay, but because you're not doing X, Y, and Z, or you're reducing your impact somewhere else, that's where you can make those savings to then have the budget to be able to invest in the bigger ticket items. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I've got a question about food.
Yes.
Because we're in the Garden of England and because we are surrounded by well, lots of lovely food and drink, including red meat. I just wondered if you can comment a bit on, or maybe point us towards, sort of, we know that red meat has the highest carbon footprint, but can we also account for local? So when we think about places like the Good Shed or Hedgers, just in Canterbury, places where we can access meat that is local. Yeah, just wondered if you could comment a bit about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, a really good point, because it's a constant dilemma in terms of, I've got a local butcher down the road, I'm trying to think about going plant-based, and seasonal is your biggest win, really. Anything that's in season is going to be, it's in surplus, and you're going to have, the best cost for it. So seasonal is your best thing. Plant-based is great, but obviously if you're shipping in avocados from South America versus going to a beef farmer that's 5 minutes up the road, that's going to have an implication. So it really, I think, depends on where you're getting it from. So it's the locality, the seasonality, and then also the plant versus the meat thing. So there is no right answer for that, unfortunately. It's a case of looking at where are you in the season, but definitely, using those local suppliers is fantastic, and again, that's pushing back into the economy. And that is the only, I guess, downside with sustainable development goals, in the sense of, you're doing one, i.e. supporting local economy, but then life on land, where you're supposed to be eating plant-based and not deforesting, from an agriculture perspective, this is where they're conflicting. So unfortunately, there is no perfect solution, but the fact that we're even having these conversations and asking those questions, and having those relationships with local suppliers is a huge part of sustainability. So yeah, sorry, there's no clear answer to that one.
I think maybe I'd be interested in what some of the other questions are around this, but in terms of food surplus in Canterbury, pay it forward schemes, organisations that can help, I think if we could maybe pull that together for Canterbury, so that when we have events, we can share that information. I think that'd be really useful.
Yeah, that would be brilliant.
Danielle,
yes,
I just had a question. Obviously, a lot of these methods are more expensive than their counterparts. Not all of them, but in the short term, they may be more expensive. And I'm thinking, especially around the things like the catering and the food. How do you, do you have any advice for basically convincing the audience that it's worthwhile paying a little more to be sustainable? Because I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do, like if you're selling a ticket and you're maybe adding a quid to it or something for the sake of sustainability and you know, preventing climate change. Do you have any advice on getting their message across that it is worth the customer paying a little extra for that?
For me, and this is something that I come across daily, particularly around the food piece, where you've got stakeholders that were expecting a steak and you're giving them an aubergine. It's quite a different experience. But for me, it's about just make that really, really good. And, you're educating them on the piece. And I like to bring that experience into the event. So, rather than just sort of serving something up that's maybe plant-based, telling the story, getting the farmer there, getting the butcher there to explain, where has this food come from? What's the story behind it? And really building that into your event as an experience. Because I think, as you say, just doing a markup on it and, your communication around it is very little. You need to be really selling in that value. And, as I said at the beginning, for most millennials now, they're expecting that, they're wanting that added value, they're wanting that story, and they want to be buying and supporting initiatives that are aligning with their values and their goals. So I think we all need to be better at telling that story and communicating. This is a sustainable option that we've gone for, and this is why. It's not, we've not taken meat off the menu and hoped you weren't going to notice. We've done it for X, Y, and Z, and building that in. But no, I agree that it can be challenging, especially when there's a cost implication. But I think for me, if there are short-term issues in terms of those cost implications, it's a long-term, it's a short-term maybe outlay for a long-term gain. Solar, for example, that's not something that can be cheaply delivered, but after 5 years you've paid for it. So it's trying to get that balance right. And I think for me, if you're cutting back on other areas and you're sort of pooling those resources for things that you're not doing, you can then afford to invest in the things that you want to do that are your big ticket items. But communicating that and sharing those key wins would be key part to that. But I can definitely come back with some more tangible stuff to help with that and sort of steer you in the right direction. Cool. I'm conscious of time, so I just want to sort of jump into how we can drive the positive side. So people is a massive element of this. Just where am I? We've got the power obviously to bring everybody together for an event, whether we're celebrating or whether we're educating people. So, this is thinking about, your equality, it's your diversion, it's your accessibility. So we always ask, if there's dietary requirements, but are we thinking wider in terms of those accessibility requirements? Are there language requirements? Have you got a nursing mother that needs a private space? Have you got, anyone with neurodivergent issues that you need to be capturing? And if you've got quiet space, have you got outside space? All of these things, and you'll see these images here of a wellbeing bar that's sort of popping up in more of an exhibition sort of setup, but just for some space away, some calm away from the chaos, really. And so how we can build that sort of that wellbeing, that well ventilated spaces, well lit rooms, and access to natural daylight, all of those sort of improve that experience for your delegates, and obviously they're going to get the most out of it. And obviously anything that you're doing outside is a huge win for that as well. We want to be leaving a positive legacy. So this is an example of one of the I think it's the pickled egg inns, the pubs. But Pickled Egg Company pubs that are running around East Kent, but they have on each of their menus, this is where all of our suppliers are. This is where all of our produce comes from, which again, really builds into that telling the story. It's a real conversation starter. It's really interesting, but we want to be thinking about how can we be leaving a positive legacy with our event, and how can we, as I say, be donating surplus food, that think global but act local mandate, supporting local businesses, as we were just mentioning, is a huge thing, especially at the moment in terms of the economy, and sort of getting our high streets back up and running, and really sort of pushing that positive impact. So thinking about your event experience and how can you build in maybe like a community element. Can you do a street clean or a beach clean? I know one of the bid networking things coming up, I think in May with Stag Coffee, there is a litter pick as well as a networking opportunity. So thinking about how you can sort of tick both those elements and bringing those people together and bringing them on the story as well is really important. And then lastly, I've got sort of 3 overarching things that we need to be thinking about. So strategy is you know, absolutely paramount. A lot of the time, if you're thinking about sustainability at the 11th hour, that is honestly when it's going to cost you more money. If you're thinking about it at the very beginning, and you can be building in these you know, these partnerships and these techniques and this planning, you know, that makes everything a lot easier, especially, you know, taking the example of the food surplus and sort of resharing things. If those systems are already in place, it makes life a lot easier. You know, we also want to have buy-in from our stakeholders and our investors. So try setting up working groups and sort of, you know, green task forces. And also going back to basics, you know, what are we trying to achieve with this event? What is the purpose? A lot of the time, you know, where I was working previously in financial services, it was very much, you know, events for events' sake. Let's just do events. Is an event even the right thing for what you're trying to achieve? You know, we want to be really questioning everything. And then the events that we are delivering, making sure that we're almost challenging, you know, is that right? Is there a different way of doing that? So building that sort of that strategy in, and we don't have to do everything all at once. You know, sustainability has to be sustainable, but it's about making sort of little changes and thinking about how we can tweak things, you know, and also learning from our experiences. You know, you've done something one time, okay, let's measure that, let's report on that, and then let's think about how we can do that differently next time. And sharing your story is key. The next one is all around sort of measurements. So as we saw with the carbon footprints, there you can't do anything if you don't know where you're starting from. You can't reduce anything if you don't know where your baseline is. So starting to think about your carbon measuring is key. And there's loads of carbon calculators out there. There's loads actually in the event world, and which have quite sort of high hefty price tags. But Geeky Zero is a free one. If you wanted to start having a look at the carbon footprint of your business or your event, that's a really, really good one, good place to start, and I can share the details. But again, you know, this is something that you really want to be communicating and sort of showing, you know, if you're doing an annual event, okay, with this year it was 12 tons of carbon, and then next year, you know, it was 10, and so on and so forth. But bringing people along on that journey is really key. And then lastly, find your tribe. This is all about sort of working with partners that are on the same wavelength as you. You know, if you're starting to think about, you know, you want to build sustainability into your events and into your business, but your suppliers and your supply chain are not on board with that, it's probably time to find new suppliers. You know, you need to be working with people that supporting your mission and your vision, and it takes a hell of a lot of the headache out of it. I mentioned before, you know, about venues. If you first port of call really for a sustainable event is to find a sustainable venue, because that's your waste, that's your catering, that's your energy, and if it's locally and sort of centrally accessible, that's also your transport as well. So a lot of the things can then be measured and be managed by working with one supplier. So it makes life a lot easier. So think about who you're working with and how you can be working with different partners to sort of make that journey and that transition to being sustainable a lot easier. So lastly, just to sort of bring it all together, I mean, really for me, I think sustainability is about efficiencies. It's the heart of sustainable event practices, and sort of doing more with less. And hopefully you can start to see how these ideas are sort of connecting to saving money, making money, but also protecting the planet at the same time, not to mention also the positive impacts around people. But remember, you know, costs are not just those that are itemized in a budget. Low prices often come at the cost of people and the planet, and quick wins often come at the cost of sustainability altogether. So we need to think less about, you know, sustainability not as a cost center, but as a value driver. And that's where we're coming back to that messaging and that marketing around sharing what you're doing and why you're doing it, bringing it back to that purpose is really, really important. So I think we're okay, we've got 5 minutes for time, which is just about right. So I wanted to, as I promised, to sort of wrap up with some sort of key takeaways so that you've got things that you can go and put in place today, this week, this month, and the rest of the year. So firstly, 3 things you can do this week. So firstly, really, really simple, switch your search engine. So if you're not already on Ecosia, ECOSIA, it behaves and is exactly the same as a Google search, but instead of I don't even know what Google is investing in, but you're planting trees with Ecosia. So exactly the same experience, but a positive impact. So it's really simple switch, it's free, and you get your little tree counter in the corner. So that's a really, really easy one. Secondly, I would take some time out to either watch a documentary, have a little read of something, a read of a blog, maybe take time to sort of digest what's been sort of shared in this, particularly the science bit, but really getting into sort of understanding and engaging a little bit more with the topic. And the third one is to start talking about what your experience has been. How do you feel about climate change? How do you feel about sustainability? The biggest thing we can do is talk about it, you know, and that spreads that infectious impact, that we can start sort of mitigating that change. So these are 3 things, sort of really simple things you can start doing this week. 3 things you can do this month: measure your carbon footprint. So Geeky is there. That's the one I mentioned. It's a free resource. And actually, if you've got a team, there are different leader tables, and it's really sort of a good gamified way of making carbon reporting and carbon measuring fun. Experiment with plant-based eating. I'm not saying go fully vegan. You know, again, that needs to be a gradual process, but you can start by introducing meat-free Mondays, or again, you know, bringing a chef in and making it part of the experience, to warrant, as you mentioned earlier, you know, warrant maybe that additional price tag. But again, if you're cooking and you're making choices about seasonal vegetables and things that are in season and it's local, actually, you know, vegetables should be cheaper than meat would be anyway. And definitely look at doing a single-use audit. So what have you got in your business or at your event that is single-use, whether it's a banner that's dated, whether it's plastic knives and forks, plastic bags, straws, any sort of materials that you're only going to be using once. Think about how you can sort of switch those out for reusable alternatives. And then 3 things, thinking about longer terms for the rest of the year, what you can do for the rest of the year. So exploring your supply chain that we sort of touched on, and making sure you're working with people that are supporting your vision and your mission, and how can they bring yours to life. Secondly is switching to a renewable energy supplier. This would have been a to-do this week because it's so simple to do, but obviously in the energy crisis, it's, you know, it's a bit of a dodgy one at the moment, but keep an eye on that and obviously switch as soon as you can. I think longer term about sort of investing in those renewable technologies. And lastly, starting to share your sustainability story. You know, a hell of a lot of people I speak to, particularly from a venue perspective, are doing loads of things, but none of it's on their website, none of it's on their social media. You wouldn't know about it unless you were having a conversation. I don't know if that's a fear thing, that they don't feel like they know enough, they're terrified of greenwashing. You know, there's lots of reasons, but it's really important that, you know, we want to be bringing people along on this journey, and sharing what we're doing, what's winning, what's not, what's challenging, and sort of bringing those ideas to the forefront. So that would be my sort of advice for this week, this month, and this year. So I think we've got time. We should have just a couple of minutes left. If we all sort of came back as a group, I'd love to just know what one thing you're going to take away from today's session and have a go at either your next event or in your business. Just one thing would love to hear.
Should I start? For me, I'm just going to kind of reiterate what Rachel actually brought up earlier. I just think from I mean, we've looked at, when we do our outdoor public events at the Dane John Gardens, we've looked at solar generators before, and it was just out of reach financially. It just kind of, the mechanics just didn't allow for us to afford to do that. But for me, it just seems to just highlight everything you said. Just really highlights how I think we as a city, as Canterbury, and kind of you know, the rest of the country as well, our event spaces need to be ready for events, and you can't just kind of sit there kind of burning through fuel to kind of power these things. It just seems nuts. So I think we just got to kind of all focus on, well, from my point of view, that's what I can take away from this. But yeah.
Okay, super. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I would like to go.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, Julia. I'll just because it's on that point. I think what we can do on Blake's point is to take that back into the marketing and events group and Canterbury culture groups that we run. The council is looking at power in the Dane John, and I'm waiting on a timeline for that. But is there something we can do collectively on solar generators? I don't know, but maybe we could put that on the agenda. So we'll take that away for sure.
And if there are any sort of cooperatives that we can use, I mean, as I said on the plastic free group, you know, and people are saying, you know, I really can't afford to get rid of my plastic containers or whatever, but actually as a group, if you're all coming in together. So I don't know whether, Blake, if you're responsible for all the events in the Dane John, or whether there are different stakeholders, different people that can come together and share those costs. You know, we're going to have, I don't know, 8-10 events going on in the Dane John. This is what a, you know, sustainable generator is going to look like for those. And so again, thinking of sort of longer term planning. So rather than sort of one event at a time, thinking about collectively what that looks like, and seeing if we can negotiate on a rate for that. That'd be an idea.
Julia, sorry.
Thank you, Lisa. Sorry, I wanted to raise my hand digitally, but I cannot find the button. I don't know what happened today, but I don't have much experience in organizing events. So basically, recently working with Danielle on the event in March, next week actually, that was interesting and eye-opening for me, and a couple of examples that I wouldn't probably think about if I was to organize all myself. Instead of producing dated banners or dated logo, just you know, produce something that they can use, you know, next year, in next few months, and so on. So example like this. Another one, instead of buying decoration of the venue and loads of these items, just rent them so they can be then used by somebody else. And again, it is this may seem like a basic or simple example, but I wouldn't, not having experience and not having someone to actually prompt me think this way, I wouldn't think. I would just go, you know, buy cheaply and then chuck in the bin. Horrible thing to do. But yeah, there were a couple of really interesting suggestions, and so thanks, Daniel, for that. And it made me think, like, you know, we are not losing and not missing out at all. The visual side of the event is still going to be really good, but at least we can reuse it, and or just rent and give it back to the contractor who supplied it just for that one evening. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Who wants to go next? Paul, you don't have mute on. Do you want to have a go?
Thinking? A couple of things I mentioned is things like getting signage organised at the moment, which I know is not events, but again, I've chosen a company does eco-friendly inks, and more sustainable choices. I think in terms of events, sort of events that I'll be looking to run for Tai Chi, Qigong, things like that. I'll be looking to find venues that people can walk to. I live in the city anyway, so I'll try and find some places. I haven't actually looked at Dame John as a potential venue for an event for doing something like Tai Chi. Not now, it's a little bit cold, but maybe in the spring, and the spring will be the summer to do that. And it's certainly something that I want to add on to the website that I'm writing. Is I've already written in a little piece about the eco-sustainability of it, just because I kind of want to be a good citizen of the world.
Absolutely, that's amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing.
Can I jump in next?
Yeah, go for it.
You've got me.
To add,
oh, sorry, go on, Paul.
No, I was just going to add to Julia, and for future reference for anybody, if you want to put your hand up or anything, it's in the reactions section at the bottom of your screen for future reference. Minor detail.
There we go. I was thinking very, very base level here, more about meetings, and it reminded me of a session that we went to, Danielle, and it was actually about sustainability.
Yeah.
I went to an event last week that was very key. The whole story of the venue was about it being a very green venue and sort of energy, solar power, all of this. It's a venue for weddings. And the food that they produced, we had cups of tea in proper cups and saucers, and we had locally produced, locally sourced food, amazing stews that they provided. But there were two things that I'm now thinking about actually they shouldn't have done. One of them was that the stews that they produced, although the story was all about being locally sourced, they provided them in what looked like sort of cardboard bowls, but they obviously were single-use paper. They should have just put them in china bowls. And now I know, I'm thinking about that. But also with the lovely cups and saucers, there came biscuits, but they were singly wrapped biscuits from Italy. And I do remember from the meeting we went to where they had the biscotti with the plastic wrappers, and the fact is you could just buy a packet of biscuits and put them out on a plate and you would have only used one wrapper for all of that.
And even, you know, like the single-use sachets and the little plastic milk things, you know, and thinking about hotels that have got those single use, not to mention the sort of the water bottles, but also the toiletries in the bathrooms, all those sorts of things, which again is a huge faff and a cost for them. You know, if they can be refillable things that go on the wall and they're just having to top them up, I mean, that's a huge cost saving. Looks better, and you know, is getting rid of that plastic use trail. So
I know
no,
we're running over slightly, but Anna, did you want to come in? I think I saw you go off mute.
Yeah, I was just going to say I found the Ecosia suggestion a really good idea, so I'll check that out. And I don't have a lot of control over kind of what the university does in terms of its sustainability, but it's something I definitely want to find out more about. And even what I can do in my own department would be good. I know we've got a couple of bins, but no one seems to know what they're for. But I'm not even sure if what goes in the bin goes to the right place, you know? So yeah, so I think I'll just be working at that low level to begin with. But obviously with events that we do, I'll keep all this in mind. But I think initially it'll just be sort of start with the office and see how we progress.
Absolutely. And you know, that I mean, I don't know if everyone's finished, but that sort of brings me on to the next point in terms of, you know, to wrap up, that it exactly is that, Anna, in terms of it's those small actions that, you know, if everybody is starting to do that and everybody's starting to, you know, just asking those questions, that is a huge thing. Coming back to the Best Buy None Awards we're doing next week, you know, I just happened to ask the question around, you know, what are we doing with regards to menu? You know, and then the next minute the chef was sitting talking to us, and we've now got, you know, a locally Kent sourced menu. All of our food and drink is pretty much coming within a sort of a 10 to 15 mile radius of the event. We're now carbon reporting the whole event, you know, from having just one conversation and asking one question. So obviously that's not going to happen all the time, but it's about, I think, just sort of keeping that pressure on, but making those small individual changes. And exactly that, you know, it's not about a few people doing it perfectly. It's about all of us doing it imperfectly and having a go and sharing, or, you know, this was a struggle, have you got a supplier for this, you know, and even just suggestions that have come out of this in terms of what would be helpful for the people on the call is something I can go away and put together and make that a little bit more, you know, user friendly, that it'll be a user guide. So but yeah, absolutely, just starting small, and you know, you also need to get your confidence up with that as well, and sort of get some small wins, and then the bigger things will come.
Danielle, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's joined us. And I'll be in touch because I can link you in with some of your colleagues who are involved in different groups happening around the area. But I just wanted to say, for us, we don't expect in any way, shape or form to achieve perfection. But what I hope that we're doing by measuring the impacts of our events is it will enable us to monitor change and make better decision making. So we're going into this not trying to be discouraged by the measurement of our carbon footprint at our events, but to inform change going forward, both for the events we run and I guess collectively for a city. I guess I want that to be our mindset with this, as a mindset of positive change. So Danielle, thank you. I think you've really presented that. And if any of you go away after this and think of different questions or ideas, please feed that back to us and we can build it into perhaps the support that the bid can provide for the city, or maybe linking in with other organizations as well who can help support. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.